I just realized three things about the Redmi Note 11S. It takes about an hour to charge from 0 to 100. It most likely will be called the Poco M4 Pro 4G in some regions, but sadly, this might not be the device for you. There's something about my eyes. Okay, here's the thing about Redmi devices. Over the past 5 years, they've been easy smartphones for me to recommend to people, and that's because of the value proposition they give you here. It's cheaper than the competition, great specs for mid-range devices, but right here is where the problem begins. The Redmi Note 11S here is actually identical to the Redmi Note 10 Pro from last year. There are also great reasons to go pick up this device if you never owned that one. I know you want to know, and so without taking much of your time, yo guys, let's get started. Because I wouldn't want to waste your time in this review, here are some facts about the Redmi Note 11S while I unbox this phone. It's not a 5G smartphone. Only 2 cameras out of the 5 cameras on this device actually matter. Performance is similar to last year's model, and there's no telephoto lens on this smartphone. Not like I care anyways. Within the box you get a SIM ejector, a nicely designed plastic TPU case, a 33-watt charger, the paperwork, and a USB-C connector. With these things out of the box and out of the way, let's talk about the smartphone here. I'd admit that design is not the most important aspect about a smartphone, but it definitely goes a long way with people's choices. Without the case, you'd notice that right at the bat, this is a boxy smartphone with a slightly curved rear to mimic that comfortable feel when you hold it. But honestly, I don't think they did a great job with that design, as it feels more comfortable using the case with this smartphone. While still made out of plastic or a polycarbonate rear this year, unlike the glass from last year, you get the volume rocker and the power button case, of course, which serves as the fingerprint scanner to the right side, the mouthpiece opening, USB-C port and down-firing speaker to the bottom, an audio jack, top-firing speaker and IR blaster to the top, and a dual SIM tray with a dedicated micro SD card slot to the left side of the smartphone. These have been standard with Redmi devices, and of course, there's nothing you would miss as far as the ports and I/O go with this device. You can get the Note 11S in pearl white, twilight blue, and this my graphite gray option with a matte finish, making it less of a fingerprint magnet and more of a slippery slab of plastic. While you have plastic to the rear, and the front side has this Corning Gorilla Glass 3 protection on the screen, this smartphone is actually IP53 rated for dust and water splashes resistance. Speakers are reasonably loud but lackluster in bass, as you have this dual speaker setup, one at the top and the other at the bottom, with the top one not being as loud as the one from the bottom, just there to augment the audio you get from the smartphone. Good thing here, the Redmi Note 11S comes with a 6.43-inch AMOLED display, which is similar to what you get from the Note 10S from last year, but this time it's actually brighter. One thing to note here is that Redmi sharpens the videos that are played back on this display. It just feels colored to the eyes, and this might be a preference to some people but not other people. 1080p in terms of resolution is what you get here, and it refreshes at 90 Hz for smooth animations. The display on the Redmi Note 11S is actually really bright and gets up to 1000 nits in brightness, meaning under direct sunlight you can effortlessly use this smartphone. And that's not the first time Redmi introduced this stuff. We have this on the Redmi Note 10S and the Redmi Note 10 Pro. On the software side of things, you get MIUI 13, which is not actually far from the MIUI 12.5 you guys are used to. And this runs on top of Android 11. You get the Redmi Note 11S in 3 variants. You have the $240 one for 4 gigs and 64 gigs variant, up to $300 for the 8 gigs, 128 gigs variant memory configuration. I decided to get the one in the middle, the 6 gigs, 128 gigs config for around $280 or 135,000 Naira. You probably are wondering what powers the Redmi Note 11S processor on here. And this is the Helio G96 chipset, which is really similar to the G95 we found on the predecessor from last year. So performance on the smartphone wouldn't be really noticeably faster for day-to-day activities. Nonetheless, this is a powerful processor for basic mobile computing tasks for anyone who gets the Redmi Note 11S. Gameplay is mostly smooth here, and Redmi Note 11S wouldn't overheat like its predecessors, although you might notice the slight warmth when using this device for active and intensive processing activities. Let's talk about the cameras. You get about the same configuration as the Note 10 Pro from last year. Pardon me if I keep referring to that smartphone, as this device has a lot in common with that device. The Redmi Note 11S comes with a quad camera setup at the rear, with the main camera sensor being 108 megapixels, We have an 8 megapixel ultra wide, 2 megapixel depth sensor and a 2 megapixel macro lens. I really do love the photos that come from the Redmi Note 11S because of the good dynamic range, great details from these photos here. And the thing, like I mentioned earlier, is that the photos are not as saturated as you get from Samsung. And that should be a debate for another day. Hold on, guys. As far as saturation for your photos, I think that's a matter of personal preference. Do you like more saturated photos from your smartphone or less saturated images? Let me know in the comment section below, and while you are that, a sub to the channel would be massively appreciated. Videos are not as great as what you get in terms of the photos from this device. You are capped at full HD, which is 1080p for both the front and the rear cameras. I wouldn't say this is the worst video camera for this kind of devices. I mean, they are above average, but for sure, this could have been better. A 5000 mAh battery with a 33 watts charger is what you get with this smartphone, and the charger juices up this device from 0 to 100 in about an hour, and also this is able to take you into the next day. Generally, a solid battery life is what you get here. What now? What's so sad about the Redmi Note 11S, and why shouldn't you get this device? This is actually really similar to the Redmi Note 10 Pro, and if you own that device, you can already leave here. This video is not for you. Also consider this. If you own any device that was better than the Redmi Note 10 Pro from last year, it's most likely going to beat this one. So generally, the Redmi Note 11S might not be that device that gives you a super upgrade from the predecessor, the Redmi Note 10S, but it does take things up a tad bit. And this gives you a new ceiling or floor as you might have it when thinking about these budget devices around this price point. And now, do I recommend this smartphone, the Redmi Note 11S? I definitely would, because it is a superb and solid smartphone you should get for the price. If you want to see a video about the vanilla Redmi Note 11, click on this video here. Day.